I'm going to start the recording and mute myself. All right. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Eric Lucan. I currently have the privilege of serving as the chair for the SMART Board of Directors for this year. And I would like to welcome everybody to our first SMART Listening Forum. Tonight's forum is part of a community-wide listening tour where we're really hoping to seek to engage in meaningful conversation with North Bay residents, SMART train riders, future riders, and all stakeholders throughout the North Bay. To get us started, I'm just going to briefly introduce some of the SMART staff and SMART board members who are on, and then we'll be turning the meeting over to Santa Rosa City Council member and SMART board Director Chris Rogers. So some of the other SMART board members that are on, I'm going to hopefully get them all, but we have Director Connolly, Marin County Supervisor. We also have Director Fudge, who's a Windsor Council member. It looks like we've got Chris Rogers, Santa Rosa City Council member. And I believe we also have Sonoma County Supervisor Shirley Zane. And I think I also saw David Rabbit, another Sonoma County Supervisor and SMART Board of Directors. And we might have some other Board of Directors coming in and out. On the SMART staff side, our General Manager Farhad Mansourian is here, along with Julia Gonzalez, Brian Crowley, Matt Stevens, I believe Aaron McGrath, and a handful of others. So just trying to get everybody here to collect as much information as we can and answer any questions that might come up. Just very briefly, all of these listening forums will be recorded, and video of this meeting and other forums on this listening tour will be posted on SMART's website and be available as a video archive for anyone to access. Comments received will be available and will be presented to the SMART Board of Directors during a regularly held public board meeting. And we are very interested in your feedback, your ideas, your thoughts. We encourage you to provide constructive feedback on how we can improve. But at the same time, let us know what's working and what is SMART doing well so that we can continue to provide that great level of service. So before I turn it over to Santa Rosa Council member and SMART Director Chris Rogers, I'd like to invite Sonoma County Supervisor and SMART Director Shirley Zane to say a few words.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Am I working?
You are.
Yeah. Nod your heads. Just this whole world of trying to do these Zoom meetings is challenging. I just want to say that, we on the board were really disappointed when the measure didn't pass, but it also gave us an opportunity to really sit back and listen to what people are saying and really take it to heart. And that's what these listening tours are all about. And even though this one is focused on Santa Rosa, the truth is anybody can join, I believe. You don't have to be from Santa Rosa. As you all know, and probably many of you have read many times, is the great connector between these two North County areas. And it's great for business, and it's great for also for transportation. But it was a heavy lift. It was a really the last 5 months because of the pandemic. It really is, without a doubt. My friends who use it all the time for transportation to and from work say it is just the best to get off the freeway and take this train to work. So we're here to listen, but most importantly, we're here to take what we've heard and to apply it in a way that makes this the most successful transportation system we can. And it's not just about the train, it's about everything else too that goes into that system. So thank you for being here. Thank you for caring enough to be here. And onward we go. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Shirley. So I'm going to turn it over to our virtual host city, Santa Rosa, and hand it off to Councilmember Chris Rogers, who's going to introduce some of the team from Santa Rosa and moderate this forum this evening. Chris, thanks for hosting us, and I'm going to hand it off to you.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Supervisor, for your comments. I think for folks, what would be most helpful is to understand how we're going to use this information. So we are doing, I believe it's 10 community listening sessions across Sonoma County. We will also be doing listening sessions across Marin County, talking to folks specifically about a couple of things. One, as the supervisor mentioned, what do you see as the future for the SMART train? And then the second is, for your particular community, what are the issues that you'd like to see the SMART board work on or resolve? So what we'll be doing is, as was mentioned, we're recording these sessions. I'll be taking notes. On the city council, but also for the SMART board, working across jurisdictions, to say a couple words and to really kind of kick this off and get us going. So Tom?
No pressure. Thank you so much for the introduction, Chris. And I really appreciate everyone who's in attendance today, because I realize, many of you, like myself, are having these Zoom meetings to death, and I'm not sure what that healthy point of Zoom meetings is on a daily basis, but thank you for taking the time out of your day to actually participate in this. Because really, my belief is feedback is a gift. And I appreciate that the SMART board is choosing to go this listening route because I think it's very important. And I also want to stress for the board, I think the community is looking. What you do with this information you obtain is crucial. Because if it's just going to deaf ears, yes, we heard it, but then there's no action taken, that can be very disappointing. Because again, I'm a big supporter of the SMART train. I appreciate it once it finally came here. There have been some bumps on the road, but what I really want to stress for the SMART folks is let's partner with all of these issues, because it's going to take all of us to make this successful. And I would love to have the feeling that this is being done with us and not to us. So with that, I really invite people, be very candid. This is an opportunity to say what's on your mind. Please don't pass it up. If you don't share the information, it's kind of like if you're not at the table, you're going to be on the menu. So let's work together to try to resolve and make the SMART rail train the absolute best public transportation line in the nation. And I think we have the potential to do it, and we can start it from today moving forward. So thank you for inviting me. I can only be here for a couple more minutes, but I'll be anxious to hear what the early speakers have to say.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. So again, as I mentioned, if you have a comment, go ahead and hit the raise hand feature on the Zoom window. If you're on a laptop, it's on your bottom right hand corner. If you are on an iPad, it is probably in your top right corner. And so go ahead and hit those hands. We do have staff on the call who are able to answer some questions, but we're probably not going to get into much of a back and forth. We're really just here sort of to listen to you, to take in that input, and to help us to figure out how to move forward from here. So the first person that I'm going to call on is Danny Sheehan Meyer. Danny, I see your hand raised, and I know staff are going to be able to promote you. And when you're ready, go ahead and say a couple words.
I did not expect to be first, but that said, I'd really like to focus on the issue of promoting and supporting tourism as a means of growth and revenue. So there's no comment that's derogatory from my perspective, but I really think, like, for example, that Monday, the train's not running on Labor Day. That would have been really a fun family trip to plan, that I could have gone to Larkspur and then to the city, even on a commuter schedule. And anyway, I just want the board and to look at where we're losing revenue and potential in terms of tourism and how we can promote tourism as we come out of this COVID mess. Thank you.
Okay, so Danny, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. As I said, I'm taking some notes down here. Your main thing is expressing that you'd like the SMART board to be more involved in partnering to promote tourism and to create opportunity for folks to ride the train and to come to the North Bay.
As limited as that might be in this case, it's still very important that we kind of keep a pulse on what the Sonoma County Tourism is doing, what the Marin County Tourism, San Francisco Travel, how can we better partner with managing a train schedule that brings people back and forth to our tourism industry.
Perfect. And I heard in particularly the schedule. And so I think that that's something that we do intend to have conversations about and that I think we'll hear more about. And you were saying specifically working on the schedule to be able to help take advantage of some of those opportunities and play a role in it.
Yes.
Anything else?
No, just specifically because what can we utilize in terms of the current schedule? Like I said, I was disappointed that we couldn't use Labor Day to kind of leverage a sort of kickoff, given that all the work you guys have done on COVID and the social distancing and how healthy the train is. I think it was a missed opportunity from a marketing point of view that we could have just used that day as a send off.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Danny. All right. Next, I'm going to call on Sheila Baker. Sheila, go ahead. Really fast, and just as a quick reminder to folks, it looks like, did we lose Sheila here? We'll hold for a quick second while we get Sheila back. Just as a reminder to folks, if you've got a comment, hit the raise hand feature, get yourself in the queue, and we'll make sure that we're able to call on you as soon as we can. Sheila, are you back?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much. I have a comment about transportation equity. I listened to that videotape of the executives of the transit companies from the Bay Area and the Bay Area Healthy Transit Plan. And I was really impressed with one of the executives who was talking about the executive of San Francisco municipal transit. And he talked about transportation equity and essential riders. And I think that I would like to see SMART really take that into consideration, that it is an essential service and that it does transport essential riders. And essential riders are people who need to get to the hospital or who work in essential fields right now that are very, very important. And that some have had to, really quit jobs or something because they're not car owners and they depend on the train. Some have the bicycle accommodation or scooter or maybe another transit agency or something like a bus or whatever for the first and last mile. And it just hasn't worked for them because the runs are sometimes 5 hours apart. So they cannot get to work and back. I agree with the last speaker. I really agree with that. And as far as tourism, and that we need to also do that. But I think transportation equity is really is SMART looking at itself and saying, we really matter. We are just as important as anything, as a car or as a cab or Uber or whatever, or the bus. Most people are maybe essential riders are riding buses right now, but really they need to be riding the train because the train is so much more safe. It's fabulous way to go. And so I would like to see more runs. I would not, more scheduling, much more runs, something like on the way to what it was before, but just a little by little adding and to see how that works out. But boy, it's really needed right now. We really, really need more runs.
Thank you, Sheila. And let me ask you just really fast before you go back to being muted. So I heard transportation equity and essential ridership. The essential riders obviously is now during COVID, especially But I wanted to also clarify for transportation equity, do you also mean a more broad conversation even once COVID has been resolved? Knock on wood that it happens.
Yes, sure. It absolutely, because really, really smart matters. And we're going to see this as smart really shines above everyone as far as cleanliness and safety. Okay, so I mean, I was really impressed with the meeting earlier that we heard how incredibly safe Smart is. It's one of the safest places to be right now. So now and beyond, and because really, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years from now, we may not have COVID, but there are flus all over the place. And I for one I've caught the flu from riding a bus for sure, but I would like to think that I haven't caught it from riding the train. I think the train is really safe and it's clean and forever with us, I hope. Thank you. But more and more runs, more times that it runs during the day. And
really,
yeah.
Yeah, really appreciate that, Sheila. And for folks who are listening, the meeting that Sheila was referencing was our bi-monthly Smart Board meeting, which happened earlier this afternoon and is always open to the public. So thank you, Sheila, for being there, and thank you for being here. Next, I'll call on Willard Richards. Willard, another person who was at our meeting this afternoon and is frequently there as well. How are you doing, Willard?
Doing all right. I'd like to open with some happy news. I correspond with Smart staff and Smart board periodically by email, and in recent months it's been feeling as if I've been sending those messages into a black hole. But in the last few days, that's really turned around, and I've received many responses. And so 3 thumbs up for that. For the future of the Smart Train, we all talk about maintaining mobility in the Marin and Sonoma County region. Smart talks less than I think it should about Smart affecting how we grow. I understand the sensitivity in Marin County about growth, but the way I like to word that is that when a developer who's going to build a big project looks around for a site, there are great advantages for him choosing a site near a Smart Chase station. And so that the Smart will have a very good effect on how we grow. Another bit of good news is that in its early days, Smart needed to upgrade its skills for building a large public works project. It hired Farhad Mansourian in 1211. He came into office burdened with promises that we're still struggling with. But by all accounts, he's done an excellent job of building the rail. I think everybody that I talked to compliments him for that. When you build a project of this scale, there's all kinds of chatter and distractions that come up. And to get the job done, it's good to put your blinders on and forge ahead and do what you need to do. And Farhad has been excellent in obtaining environmental permits, dealing with private rail crossings, unique redwood trees, etc. But the collateral damage of that is that the public and the interest groups have been ignored, and so that organizations such as the Bicycle Coalitions and the League of Women Voters remain neutral in the last election. And I'm delighted to see the efforts now to get back on the good side of the public and the coalitions. But Smart is undergoing a transition. It's changing from building a public works project. Oh, and I should say that during that period of time, it's hard for the board to second guess far ahead on what he needed to do to build the rail. And so that the board relied heavily on his recommendations and tended to improve them all. But now we need different skills, and the board recognizes that. We're changing from a public works project into a rail and freight operator. So the board needs to pay attention to what kind of staff do we need to serve these new functions, and is the present staff adequate for that? And perhaps we might pay attention to whether or not a board member with skill in rail and freight operations is needed, and that would require legislation. On a
And if I could, just I want to make sure that I'm hearing you right, Willard. So if you don't mind, so what I've heard so far is that we need to talk more about the story of how SMART can be involved in how we grow in our different communities. Yes. I heard we have struggled with promises that were made, and that we need to reckon with that a little bit, and that there is a different mentality now between how we became operational and how we run, and perhaps we need to evaluate both staff and board representation and how they fit into the broader future picture. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'd like to put in a plug for the east-west bicycle route that goes over the Edwards Elliott location of the bridge over Highway 101, and also the Jennings crossing. The Jennings crossing issue has been off the table so far as we've been concerned for, we're struggling with the ballot measure, but now I think it's time to put that back on the table. That SMART needs to deal with that. And also, I'm delighted to see that the Cornerstone, the developer of the SMART property, is now presenting preliminary plans to city to go forward with that development. And I'm chair of the Sonoma County Transportation Land Use Coalition, and we very much support the density of development that we see starting there, and have other recommendations that we'll be sending in to the developer and the city.
Great. Thank you so much, Willard. I really appreciate the comments. I also, in addition to what I already mentioned, heard support for the Bike 101 crossing that Santa Rosa is working on, discussion around the Jennings crossing, and then maybe a broader discussion around what housing projects are proposed and in the works along the SMART train. If you've got more comments, and this goes for everybody else as well, please feel free to. Sorry, go ahead, Willard. Really fast.
One modification.
Yes, sir.
I recommend that SMART specifically support the Edwards-Elliott alignment rather than the Bear Cub alignment, because it provides a much better connection between the JC and the SMART station.
I apologize, Willard. I do have that in my notes as well, and I do know that that's the preferred route from the city council. So I'll make sure that I keep that in my notes here, and that the board understands that if and when we get a chance to talk about this in the near future. So I will mention for folks, we also are taking emails as well. So if you want to email the SMART board members, we're always happy to receive those. If you don't want to go too long, or if you don't want to wait in the queue. I apologize if I'm going to butcher your name. And let's also, for staff, let's make sure that we're muting folks once they're done talking, just so that we don't get some of that cross noise as well going forward. I think it's Joaquim, And if I got it wrong, I apologize. Please feel free to correct me.
That's all right, Chris. You're not the first one. So my name is Joachim Ostus, and I'm a resident of Novato, and my place of employment is in Windsor. So before COVID hit, I was riding the train to and from work. And my comment here is, I guess I understand this as a very challenging financial times for SMART, and you have to make some tough decisions. I just request that when you do take those decisions, to not go overboard in cutting frequency and schedule of service to the point that you're kind of not remaining a relevant mode of transportation for certain people. I remember when we were first discussing schedules, I made that comment of where I work, which I get off at the Sonoma County Airport Station. That's a very large employment center. And at the times, the last train leaving going southbound wasn't late enough in the day. So I made that request, and probably other people did too. And when the schedule finally came out, it was later in the day. That made it viable for me to take the train. Had it not been that, then I wouldn't have been able to take the train because I wasn't going to be sure that I could get home at the end of the day. So just, I know it can be easy to cut some runs here and there, but if we cut too much, then we start losing more people than just the people that might have been on that very, very train there. So that's all.
Right. So Joachim, what I heard, and I just want to make sure, was don't cut off our nose to spite our face, if I can paraphrase. Maintain frequency and the levels of service to the extent that we can. And what I also heard embedded in that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is when we have to do things like that, do it in partnership with the folks who are riding the train and using it to make sure that it's still usable to them. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for your comments. Next, we will go to Rick Coates. Rick, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. I was at the meeting this afternoon too, as you know, and I was much heartened by the discussion on the reformation of an advisory board. I would like to suggest that there's a couple of tasks that this board should be assigned, broad tasks. So one would be to develop or to cultivate ridership. That is, to come up with ways to increase the ridership by reaching out to groups that could conceivably use SMART and developing a relationship with them and listening to them, what their needs are, and then bringing that back to the board. And along with that, it's not unrelated, is cultivating public political support, which means addressing issues that may not seem like transportation issues, but are definitely related. Things like environment and social equity and so forth. If you go to those groups that have that as their main issues and sit down with them and talk with them about how SMART could benefit them, I think that would help to cultivate the political support you need to continue operating this rail line. Let me give you an example of tourism was mentioned already. There's a lot of places in Santa Rosa that could be considered tourist destinations, Railroad Square being one of them. But for example, it's important to connect the bicycle trails to the Joe Rodota Trail and to the Prince Memorial Greenway. People do a lot of bicycle tourism, and we'd like to encourage that kind of tourism, get people out of their automobiles we are, after all, connected to the Greater Bay Area now, where a lot of our tourists come from. And if we get those cars off of 101, so much the better. And we don't want them flooding into the city. For example, has anybody thought, well, how do we get people from Smart to Spring Lake and Lake Ruffine and those areas? We have the Southeast Greenway that's going in. How about a connection between the Greenway and the Prince Memorial Greenway? It's it could help to cultivate a lot more tourism that way. The bicycle bridges over the freeway, cultivating the student community to use SMART, get more ridership and more public support. More riders means more public support, of course. So, if that were the main job of the advisory committee, to come up with ideas for increasing ridership and public support, that's a pretty broad area, but it really focuses in on where we need the most work, I think. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Rick. So I heard we're going to talk about the function of the advisory committee and also recommend that they help reach out to groups that should be using SMART that aren't. And then what I also heard, both as a SMART board member as well as a Santa Rosa City Council member, is that there needs to be a better partnership to get folks riding the train, whether it's the Southeast Greenway, whether it's the 101 bike crossing. So I'll take that back to both my city council as well as to the SMART board for us to have that discussion. So thanks for your comments. Jeffrey Smith. Jeff, you next?
Here I am.
There you go. I can hear you and I can see you.
I had to plug in power so I could get some of that Sonoma clean power into my phone. So
Marin County folks are on. Don't quite know what that is. It's comparable to Marin Clean Energy for everybody.
We were just trying to copy Marin, whatever. So my name is Jeffrey Smith, and I own and operate and sole proprietor of a bicycle shop in Railroad Square called Bike Partners Bike Shop. I specialize in functional bikes for that fold primarily. And to that end, I located my shop in Railroad Square almost 9 years ago, specifically because of the SMART train and the promise thereof. And I was, of course, needless to say, very stoked when the train arrived about 3 years ago. I would say a little bit saddened by the fact that I haven't really seen a lot of increase in business derived directly from the train. But I'm an infernal optimist, and I continue to work towards the goal of multimodal transportation involving people on foot, riding bicycles, and rail transit. So just a small number of points I wanted to make is, first of all, I want to thank SMART board and staff for the work that you have done today on building the infrastructure for bicycles and pedestrians. It's easy to complain that it's not done, it doesn't go all the way to Cloverdale or Windsor or whatever, but I can tell you that it is substantially in place in many places that make a big difference. Almost the full length of Santa Rosa has a bike path now. I can ride all the way down to Bellevue. The San Antonio Creek undercrossing in Marin, fantastic, because the alternative, the only option prior to that was to go up into the hills on very dangerous roads in the back way into Petaluma. The San Antonio Creek undercrossing and that collaboration with Caltrans, fantastic. So the connection to Joe Rodota is there. There's an intersection under the 12 freeway. You turn left to go down the bike path on the train, the SMART path, turn right to go on Joe Rodota. Just like a freeway interchange for bicycles. It's fantastic. So again, to echo what Rick said, keep an eye on other destinations that we can link to and connect to. My experience has been that I've seen a lot of connections to existing paths, which in our locale tend to follow creeks that flow into the Laguna. And so good on that. I would love to see a connection completed between Santa Rosa and Ronner Park, between Bellevue and Golf Course. I understand that a lot of the issues relating to bike path construction have to do with environmental protections. And I'm not in favor of weakening environmental protections. They're there for a reason. But I would lend my support to anything to get that connection between these two cities together. And then extending north along existing rail up to airport would be awesome. I understand the path can only go in where new rail is existing and not before. But that rail does exist up to airport, and I'd love to see a bike path along there. Electric motorized bicycles or electric pedal assist bicycles are just sweeping the nation, sweeping the world in terms of the bicycle industry. While overall the bike industry is a depressed industry, electric bicycle sales are skyrocketing and booming because people are finding that they can get back on a bicycle and ride it without having to be in perfect shape, and they can arrive at work sweat free. So this is just sort of a heads up. Be aware that you're going to see a lot more people on electric bicycles. And then also be aware that Sonoma Clean Power is developing an incentive program similar to what they did for electric cars coming up soon. So we're encouraged by and interestingly, that incentive for electric pedal bicycles is going to target low to middle income families who are spending way too much money per capita on their cars. So that's
if I could jump in, Jeffrey, because I didn't
Sure.
want to lose the thread, I will mention I love electric bicycles. They're a lot of fun. So I heard basically be proactive and be aware that this is a trend that's coming. We can definitely have a conversation about if we're prepared for that and if there's any changes that we need to make relative to the train. I also heard be focused on the connectors for the rail, or excuse me, for the multi-use path between Bellevue and Golf Course, as well as up to the airport. And then overall sort of the sentiment of supporting bike tourism as well.
That's right, and tell the marketing department to run it up the flagpole. We have a smart pathway. It's there. It's fantastic. Get out there and ride your bike. You know, it's complaining. You know,
and they're on the call listening. So I think you just did ring it up the flagpole. So
just a couple more. I'll point out. We all know what bike share is. It's sort of the alternative to renting a bike from a bike shop like mine, where you just go and with a card you check a bike out of a kiosk and ride it and return it to the kiosk. That's one of the models. The Trek store here in Santa Rosa has implemented a electric bike share program, and I can go 724 and check out an electric bike anytime I want and ride it 30 or 40 miles on a charge with assist. And we can expect to see those expanded. And so my advice to SMART would be to work with local bike shops who are collaborating with the vendors for those systems and look at positioning them at train station stops. There's an opportunity to support local businesses here while embracing the bike share program. So I already mentioned a lot of this other stuff. I'll just end by saying, bicyclists are a resilient bunch. We kind of have to be to survive the roads. We will find a way when other people will give up. And the ridership on the SMART train has been pretty phenomenal. I'm not a numbers person, but I think it's been pretty high. And I'm not sure what it is now, but recognize the fact that the bicycle community is very strong and vital and wants us to succeed. And lastly, I'll say when you're booking your next trip after COVID, go to Holland and visit some of the train stations in Holland and see if you can count how many bicycles are parked at any given train station near Amsterdam. Upwards of 10,000 bicycles parked on any given day. 10,000. Right. So I think we have walkers here for 6 or 12 or 15 bicycles, but we need to really change the paradigm and really think large scale, I think, for getting people out of cars onto bicycles and onto trains. So that's it. Thank you very much for being there.
No, really appreciate it, Jeffrey. And also, again, mentioning some of the partnerships. That is also a conversation happening with the Sonoma County Transportation Authority and the Regional Climate Protection Agency, trying to talk about how we develop those cultural shifts. So SMART needs to be at the table is what I heard. We'll continue to have those conversations. Thanks for the comments.
Chris?
Yes.
Chris, my name is Wayne Seaton, and I was not able to get in on Zoom, but I did want to make a comment. I'm on the telephone. Is it an
Absolutely.
opportunity?
Yeah,
Can
Wayne,
I do that now?
Yeah, go ahead and jump on in now that Jeffrey's done. Wayne, go ahead and jump on in.
Okay, well, I heard what Willard had to say about the need to have the linkage across Highway 101 with the Community Connector Bridge. And I fully endorse that, what he said, because I believe that what's going to happen is if we get that bridge, and what I'm asking for is that SMART endorse the bridge and endorse the path that Willard mentioned. And the reason for that is I believe they're going to see a tremendous increase on the number of passengers who will come across Highway 101. It's a nice, it will be a safe and convenient way of getting across. I think we'll get a lot of passengers coming across from the JC and also from the east side, from the west side. I believe we will see passengers coming if we have the Jennings Avenue crossing available also. That will be really a convenient and safe way for people to cross from the east side to the west side and to get onto the train. So that was my comment, was basically endorsing the Elliott Edwards route. And this has been approved. Well, actually, it was a consensus after they had the EIR that was conducted by Caltrans. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Wayne. And I will tell you, I believe that SMART has endorsed the 101 overcrossing, but I'll double check with staff as well and make sure. But I also have your comments down, support for that, support for the Jennings crossing, and we'll make sure that that gets in there. Next, we're going to go to Mike Arnold. Mike? Mike also was with us at the afternoon meeting, so I give him folks credit for doing that as well. So thanks for being here, Mike.
Am I unmuted?
There you go.
Good.
A nice background.
Good. You know, just based on the list of participants, I would think most of the people here probably voted for Measure I. Of course, I didn't vote for Measure I, but I really thank the SMART for holding these sessions and allowing us to speak for more than 3 minutes, which is the limit, as you know, at the board meeting, sometimes less than that, depending on the topic. You know, I really think board members need to hear from those people who opposed Measure I, not just people who voted for Measure I, and that is if you want to win the next election. The first thing to realize is that in March, you were trounced. You lost by a lot. And if you compare the number of votes that SMART got in 2008 with the number of votes that it got in 2020, you got 88,000 fewer yes votes in Sonoma County alone. Excuse me, that's Marin and Sonoma County, and 20,000 more no votes. You guys have got a lot of work to do to try to win back those voters. Now, I think a lot of you know I was very involved in the campaign. And so what I'd like to do is to share a lot of misinformation regarding how we won that campaign and why we won that campaign. There's been a lot of emphasis on the money Molly Flater gave the campaign, and there's no question the money does make a difference. But if you look at our campaign literature and you listen to the ads, we were focusing pretty much on two things: transparency and accountability. And this agency is challenged because it continues to operate in a non-transparent way, and the board continues to not hold staff accountable for not being transparent. And as evidence of that, there's plenty of evidence of that. One came up during the campaign, which was when the SMART did not respond to a request for ridership data. COST, which is the organization in Marin County, has filed many PRAs and virtually getting very few response. They're called non-response responses. It requires COST to go out and get a lawyer and fight them in court to try to get publicly available information.
So Mike, if I can ask you, because I know we can talk all day about how the campaign played out. you've mentioned two things specifically, transparency and accountability. If I can ask you, what would you like to see from the Smart Board to be more transparent? And what would you like to see in terms of accountability going forward? We can spend all day, I apologize, we can spend all day talking about the campaign.
No, it's fair enough.
I want to hear from you.
Trust me, I've been involved in this for 14 years. So, it's a long list. But transparency is about providing public regular information on the performance of SMART. And the only thing it's really providing data on is ridership data now, which is actually very good, but it required a political deal for them to do that. Now, in terms of accountability,
really fast?
No, hold on, Chris. Hold on.
Go ahead. What
did the board hold staff accountable for that mistake? That contributed to your loss. One of the problems is that the board is a rubber stamp organization for whatever staff puts in front of it. You've heard lots of criticism from me on this issue. You've seen op-eds in the newspaper on this issue. The most recent one was the approval of the purchase of freight assets without zero financial information in front of it. You just operated on a trust me basis on a purchase that may work out, but may not work out. That is the combination of obfuscation and the lack of accountability on the board to ensure good governance practices by an agency that is now under threat. It needs to win back voters that voted against this, a lot of voters that voted against this. And to do that, it needs to change the culture of the agency. And the number one driver of culture of this agency is your general manager. It should be apparent to everyone involved in this agency, whether they like him or they don't like him, the culture of the staff, the culture of the obfuscation, the lack of regular responses to PRAs and issues of that ilk, presenting information to the board that is flagrant, like the strategic plan. Chris, you've got plenty of emails from me regarding why that strategic plan had a forecast buried in it that was ridiculous. It was so optimistic. I tried to convince Gary Phillips in multiple emails, despite my quals in economics and finance. Nope. Staff just told him I was wrong. And it's like today at the board meeting. I pointed out better information the board could use to provide a forecast for what its revenue stream was going to be. It was ignored by your CFO. She attacked me personally in the meeting using my name on PowerPoint slides at the meeting. And what did the board do? Circled the wagons and said, as Eric said, well, we support the staff.
So Mike, let me ask you.
What about the information?
Let me ask you, Mike. Let me pull back. So what I've heard so far is new board, new general manager, better response system for PRAs, and better performance data for SMART. You specifically talked about ridership. Is there specific data that you'd like to see as well?
I mean, do people on this forum know that right now we are spending more than $60 for every rider on the SMART train? And it would seem to me that would be a relevant piece of information, in particular, because during the campaign, this was one of the issues we raised. It was one of the issues that voters hooked into that said, wait a minute, how much are we spending in taxpayer dollars to allow someone to ride this train? And yes, they're only operating 16 trains. They preserved most of the staff positions, in which case they're spending lots of money for fewer riders, which means it's even costing more per rider. And most of the people on this forum are coming up with various kinds of ideas. Gee, how can we increase ridership by spending money? No one is raising the issue of whether or not this train operates efficiently. And one of the reasons they don't do it is because that information is only put out there by opponents. And like in the Trump campaigns, you tend to dismiss everything we say. The reality
let me pull you back.
The reality is there's a couple of key, let me ask you a key performance measure. You're spending $65 million to extend this train 3 miles to Windsor. How many additional riders are you going to get for that kind of taxpayer expenditure?
Okay, so
Do you
Mike,
know?
let me ask you from we're trying to figure out what kind of numbers you want to see. So I've heard from you now cost per rider and cost for the extension per additional potential rider, right?
These are, and Chris, I would
And what else would you
advise,
like to?
I would advise the board meet with MTC staff, because the MTC staff regularly utilizes these kinds of measures. The other one is taxpayer subsidy per rider, which is a little bit different than operating expense per rider. But with all your extensions, okay, as an example, as someone who is trained in economics, I can tell you that the extension to Windsor, the extension to Healdsburg, an extension to Cloverdale is going to cost you guys more money and generate more expense than the fair revenues you're going to get. And what does that mean to your operating budgets that are already tight? You never analyze real operating budgets and what the costs are of operating trains. We have an internal estimate. It's about $4,000 to run the trip, to run from Airport Boulevard to Larkspur. That's just an estimate. It would be better if staff provided that number so people understood that trains are very popular with the public, but they don't come for free. And that's been one of the primary challenges of this rail agency from the beginning, which is the underlying rail economics of a within suburban rail line where costs are very high. It isn't generating much fare box return. And so the subsidy provider is huge. And it seems as a well-governed agency, which is what you need to be if you're going to win back these voters, you need to start regularly reporting these kinds of performance statistics so the public can see the decisions you're making rather than the kind of propaganda that regularly emanates from staff. As an example, today, claiming that, gee whiz, you just discovered $4 million when in fact it was already known several months ago. It was just that your CFO chose not to disclose it because she didn't want to use state data as a basis to estimate what the revenue stream would be for the last 2 months. That kind of issue is the issue that was transmitted in all of our campaign literature. And I know because I helped design that campaign literature.
Okay, so Mike, so I want to reiterate. So I heard from you, better transparency, and that includes better performance metrics, cost per rider, cost for the extension per new rider, taxpayer subsidies for rider, cost per trip, that kind of data. I think
that kind of data,
and then I also heard. Wait, hold on, Mike. Hold on. And then I also heard accountability. You said rubber stamp board, so better culture, better board, better GM. And better responses to PRAs. I want to make sure I got everything down. And again, Mike, we can talk all day about the campaign.
We can talk all day. Let me give.
My interest is, where do you want to go from here, and what do you want to see? And I'm going to give you about 2 more minutes, and then I got to go on to the next person.
That's fine. You did, Chris. I thank you for the time. I thank you for the time you've given me. That's more time than any SMART board member has ever given me in 15 years. So here is an example. One of the things this board seems tied up with is extending this rail line north to Cloverdale because that was part of Measure Q. If you look at these votes and the distribution of votes, if you spend the money to go to Cloverdale, you are going to really put this train into significant, even more operating challenges. It seems to me the board needs to start thinking about how to manage the resources it has. And one of the ways is building additional passing tracks so it can operate more trains, because for sure, even if this train got more popular, it won't have capacity to operate those trains unless it operates trains more frequently and to operate trains more frequently, it's going to have to build additional passing tracks. And believe me, I believe this is something Farhad agrees on.
Okay, Mike. So what I just heard, and I think one that we hadn't heard yet so far, is talk about the possibility of building the double tracks in strategic areas to grow ridership on the line that we already have before we look to extend further up into Healdsburg and Cloverdale. Is that fair
Correct.
to say? Okay. I've got that down as a suggestion.
That's enough.
I appreciate it, Mike. We'll keep talking. David Oster, go ahead, David.
Am I okay? Do I have to unmute myself or am I all right?
We see you.
Okay. I just want to commend pass this on to the board, the process that you're following to listen to the public. I also attended the meeting earlier, and reaching out and understanding that there's a problem, and the smart train needs to listen and understand what the public's thinking more than the input it's now getting from the Citizens Oversight Committee, which is basically a financial committee. And I've been honored to be a member of that. And I am very interested in the process the board is following as expressed in the meeting today to expand that and to get more public input. I bless you for listening to some of the things that we've listened to the last hour. Some of these things you heard many times before, refighting old battles. But I think you're involved in doing the right thing, and I really support what you're doing. And thank you for doing it.
Absolutely, David. Just as a reminder for folks, if you still have comments, we're coming up at 6 o'clock now. We'll probably, I think, go another 10, 15 minutes or so, and then I'll turn it back over to the chair. So if you are interested in making a comment, hit the raise hand feature. And if we have anybody who still needs to make a comment, you'll be up.
Did my hand go down somehow?
Oh, it must have. Sorry, Jack. But if you want to jump on in, go ahead.
I think it got tired. It was, I could only hold my hand up so long.
You're not the only one.
The blood runs down. So
go ahead, Jack.
I was speaking in behalf of Friends of Smart here. They said I could do this. I personally read the forums and the editorial pages in part because I'm a masochist, and in part because it's a window on the community, what they're saying and thinking, or at least a subset of the community, those who are willing to speak up and write and be heard and take those pot shots that come rocketing back. They're probably not the silent majority, but nevertheless, it's a pulse, it's a window. And so I bring to you some of that, and my colleagues at Friends of Smart can do likewise. For example, Kevin Fichter's lengthy article in last weekend's Press Democrat about the status of Smart. It's a great status report. And that was well and good. You could read it and it was informative. But if you read the e-edition online, you'd see a multi-score of vitriol that followed it. Somewhat like Mr. Arnold just reported, wasted money, wasted time, never work, et cetera, et cetera. And this is stuff that's painful to read as a representative of a group that's an advocacy group for Friends of Smart. So my comments are in that context. Our mission as Friends of Smart, we are an advocacy group. Our mission is to help make Smart as good as it can be. Not all by ourselves, but not be silent either. How can we help you be as good as you can be with the resources and the environment you're operating in? So I read the comments by the naysayers, which are manifold and in some respects all over the map. Economics is one dimension, but I don't want to repeat all of their or any of their criticisms, but I think, and here's the beginning of my input, that we, SMART and the advocacy groups and all supporters and writers, need to continually remind the public about why SMART came into being. And we can talk about weed level issues, or we can talk about high level issues. And I'm going to just briefly point to the vision, the high level issues. One is to provide better mobility for the North Bay. We've poured money into widening the Novato Narrows and through Petaluma. And I would like to ask some of the economists in our group, what is the cost per rider mile for doing that? Easy to criticize SMART and all public transit, but what about highways and their whole life cycle cost per passenger mile? That would be
and Jack, I do want to pull you back just a little bit. I don't want to get into a back and forth for folks, but I do want to hear what your suggestions are moving forward.
Okay.
For SMART.
We need to remind the public regularly about what our purpose is and SMART's original reason for being. They're still as valid as ever. Provide environmentally superior mode of transportation and better land use, that is to say, controlling sprawl, all of which will lead to human flourishing. Bill Cordham, whom many of you remember, said that SMART will be the best land use planning tool we'll have in my lifetime and our lifetimes. Of course, he's gone, but it is. And it's a tool that is, whose value is not easy to measure in economic or dollars and cents, but it's a huge issue. So the negative comments in the paper and the forums, again, say things like technology will save us. Like, we'll have flying automobiles. We don't need roads. Don't worry about that. Or congestion can be solved with more pavement. Or global warming is a hoax, or at least it's not important. We need to remind the public that these things are existential issues and that that's why SMART exists. And so I love the purpose of SMART. And I think the vision gets lost sometimes in the day-to-day and the minute-by-minute slugfest. But transcending all of this is this vision and this purpose.
Yeah, so Jack, so what I'm hearing from you is we need to do a better job of telling the how as well as the telling of the why. Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
perfect.
Reminding. It's not brand new, but hey, if LA Basin had kept their rail before the population grew and they ripped them all up, they would have saved billions, tens of billions. And it's a million or two we're talking about for SMART to Cloverdale and Hillsburg. If we don't do it, think of the cost in the future when we're full of, well, I can't say it for wine growers, but if the cities are much bigger, that's all.
So Jack, I'm going to give you about 2 more minutes here. Oh, you're done? Okay. I was going to say, I know you've been a strong advocate. I know we can sit here and we can talk about the need for SMART. And I'm always looking forward to talking with you and friends of SMART about what we can do better to continue to move forward. So let's keep having that conversation. And thank you for being here tonight. Jim Schmidt, go ahead.
Esther, thank you. I want to ask a few questions. I did submit a written email. I don't know whether it's been received, but there are 4 questions on it that we could focus on if you would like, or if it's all right.
Go ahead, Jim.
I want to start with a notion of, I'm worried, I'm a proponent or a fan of SMART, but it has to work. Since inception in 2017 through right now, in any economic sense, it has not worked in a couple of ways, which I'd like to illustrate. As best I can figure, currently, the cost for each passenger, this was the board's budget in June. It's costing about $66 per passenger, one-way trip. And that's not a viable transportation service. It hasn't been below $38 since inception. Now, for comparison, Caltrain on the peninsula, it costs $6.90 per passenger. BART is $5 and something per passenger. Golden Gate Transit is $22. The ferry is $13. Local transit in Sonoma and Marin is under $10. So the costs are way out of anything that's viable in the long term. So the challenge for us is, how do we get the costs down and how do we get riders up? So question number one for the board is, where is your marketing department? You know, I don't know whether your staff or the board knows how many passengers get on and off at San Rafael or at the Civic Center or at Petaluma, and what time of day they do, where they come from. That data is all available. I've worked up station to station flows by time of day, boarding and alighting, but I've never seen it develop from your staff. Now, right now you're running 16 trains. That costs about $60,000 a day. And you're getting, in last report, 410 passengers a day. That's about $2,300 revenue. So we're having an expense or a fare revenue that's less than 10% of the cost of operation. And if you look at those trains, 4 of them have less than 25 passengers on them. I'm sorry, 4 in each direction. So it's 8 out of 16 trains right now, due to COVID, no doubt. But nonetheless, 410 riders, 2,500 seats offered in those 16 trains a day. And given the uncertainty of the future, the severe budget that everyone is going through, and you're using $7 million of reserves this year for your budget, why in the world wouldn't we try to tighten our expenses in the near term?
So what I heard, Jim, is so first and foremost, you asked about ridership specific to time and location. That actually is, I don't know what that ding was, I apologize, but that actually is on the SMART website. And
no, it's not, sir. I'm sorry, sir, it is not.
I'll have staff circle back with you because we have had that analysis that was done, and we need to keep talking about it with folks, right? So we got to make sure that it is available for everybody. But then I also heard from you, we need to focus on increasing ridership or tightening expenses, but somehow we need to bring down the cost per rider if we're going to make the train viable. Is that fair to say?
It's got to be about half of what you're running right now to get even close to what anybody else is providing service for.
Okay.
And so let's come to this ridership. What you're getting from staff is the daily riders and the riders by train. Do you know how many riders get on and off at Petaluma? Or similarly at Palo Alto? The data's there. I think you don't have a marketing department. No one has ever looked at where these riders come from, who they are, what are potential for added ridership. If to get more riders, really you're going to have to do some work about the market, the trip patterns that we could serve better than a bus or better than auto, and focused on them. I don't see any effort at all, either in board discussions or anything I see in staff work on that vein. Let's carry this forward. To bring that $66 cost down, the best that we've ever done is carry 3,275 passengers in a day, which was January 27th of this year. When we carried that many, and we had close to that for a number of days in late January, early February, pre-COVID, we had about 6 of your trains in the morning and the afternoon, which were almost capacity. We were running about 90 to 95% of available seat capacity. So that's carrying 3,200 riders. That tells me that your capacity is about 4,000 to 5,000 riders a day. And you're going to have everyone seated and no, you're going to have riders standing if they will do that for this railroad. Well, that ridership level, 5,000, is less than half of what you're going to need to get your costs down. And 5,000 is the capacity of the train. You can't get more trains. You could add a third car, I should say, to the trains to get more seat capacity. But even if you work through these numbers, you have a capacity problem before you can even get this train system into a viable economic operation. So I think we have to work on that.
So Jim, if I could, so what I heard is have a conversation around what our capacity is and what our capacity needs to be to drop that overall number of cost per rider.
Well, we'd love to get the riders going first. If we had the riders, that'd be the first. We could wring our hands, say, good start.
I hear you. I'm going to give you one more quick minute here, and then I got to go on to somebody else. But what I heard from you so far was get that number down through better marketing to increase ridership, tightening expenses, and then looking at what our capacity is and how to increase
Indeed,
capacity.
and you have an excessive headcount for your organization compared to most others in the United States.
Okay.
So let me cover one other thing.
One more quick thing, Jim, go for it.
You get about $40 million a year, $40 million in sales tax money from taxpayers in Sonoma and Marin. There are 736,000 residents in these two counties paying those sales taxes. You have about 1,700 riders maximum that you've ever gotten on your system, persons that is, making round trips more or less. So it ends up that you've got the taxpayers covering 95% of the cost of running the service. The riders are paying less than 10%. Do you think that, I asked the question to the board, do you think that's a fair proportion? The people getting the service paying 10%, the general public taxpayer paying well over, in excess of 90%.
I think that's a good conversation for us to have as well, Jim. I'm going to stop you there. We're coming close on time, so I'm going to turn it back over to the chair.
We have more which we'd like it next time.
Absolutely.
I'd be very happy to make this work I've done available to the board, to the staff, whatever, if you'd like.
Would love to, Jim. But I'm going to turn it back over to the chair, Eric Lukin. He has a couple of other folks who I know have their hands up. He can choose to take them, but I know we do have to start to wrap up. So, Mr. Chair, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Director Rogers. I'm actually going to hand it over to Director Rabbit to finish out this session. Both he and Director Rogers were instrumental in setting up these listening sessions for Sonoma County. So I'm going to hand over to Director Rabbit. I also want to recognize Director Arnold, Marin County Supervisor, and Smart Board Director Judy Arnold, who is also joining on. As I mentioned at the beginning, various Smart Board members are joining where they can to participate in these listening sessions. So good to see you both. Director Rabbit, if you want to call on a few next folks.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate that. And my apologies for joining late. And I had a conflict that I couldn't avoid and try to get here as soon as possible. I'll just look at and if you've already spoken and your hand is still raised, just take note of that. But I see, is it Greg Risley? And I apologize in advance for butchering any and all names. I'm notorious for that. Go ahead, Greg.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. First, I want to thank you for listening. I'm sorry that a lot of the measure to that. I'm very pro smart train in terms of the ecology, in terms of the cars off the road, in terms of the bike paths. As far as I can tell, it's like staff done a really good job of getting
Greg, it's a little, you're a little choppy.
The money we spend versus the money that they're bringing in. That's wonderful. My problem is with the transparency and accountability. And I feel like the board and the management has really not gotten that and just measured down that they're just not connected with what's going on.
You were great.
It's a
You were
big
fabulous.
agency, and it needs to be very accountable, and very transparent with all the information, and having the press to fight them that information about what's gone. I believe the way that's been done, I have little to no faith in the board and in Sheehan. Choices and decisions have been made in terms of accountability and transparency. Really don't give me any reason to have good faith in them. To hear Mike, Jim, these kinds of disinformation are very useful, and it seems like they should be out there. What really costs us $60 per rider, and most of the big transportation agencies are able to do this for under $10 per rider. And what's going on? I don't ride the train. I took it one time just to see what life. It was lovely, but it seemed kind of high to me. And the run times don't seem to work. It seems like you need one at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., and it takes putting in some soft tracks to be able to do that, and that should happen. I don't, you know, in terms you should know into your ridership what surveying them, what they want to run. Obviously, it needs to connect ferry. And,
I want to listen to the rest of the meeting. I'll call you after I have dinner.
Mr. Arnold, you got to mute.
So I wonder what has been done. I saw the management salaries were set up around, and they seem like a ton of money. I wonder how much the staff, management level, not running trains, sort of thing, but the staff has been reduced given the current challenges with COVID and worship and tax revenue, and all those kinds of things. What's been reduced the kinds of costs. So I'm very much behind Jim and Mike said. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
I appreciate that. So what I heard from you was talking about transparency, accountability, trust in the board, and specific examples went to compensation and workforce reduction during this COVID and whatnot. Did I capture that correctly?
Hey, David, yes, I think you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. How about Thomas Engdahl?
Hi there. Sorry for joining a little bit late. But I just wanted to share a couple of positive comments. My
Thomas.
Yeah.
You have an echo, so you must have two devices going. If you can maybe mute the one and speak to the other.
Okay. I'm trying. I only have one device going. Is that better?
That's better.
All right. So anyway, just a couple positive comments. And anytime you have a public project like this, it's going to take time to pay for itself. It's going to take time to get the riders and all that stuff. And we are in the middle of a unprecedented time with the COVID virus and people out there. My 15-year-old daughter rides the train to school. Well, did until school became a homeschooling thing every morning. We watched at the Atherton station people get on. We watched the number of people grow literally for the last couple of years while she's been driving or riding up to Santa Rosa. It's a very useful tool. It keeps cars off the freeway. It's going to take a little time to get things done. And I think people need to just really realize that we're investing in our own community. We're investing in our own children and our kids on a long term. And we're investing to make sure that our future in Marin and Sonoma County is safe, environmentally safe, and we take as many cars off the street as we can and give people the opportunity to go to the places they need to go to for their jobs. I'm not going to say more than that. I actually believe strongly in the board and believe strongly in the management of SMART, and I'm glad they're there, and I'm glad this is all coming together.
We appreciate that. Thank you, Thomas. So just to summarize, SMART being a young organization needs time to pay for itself. Obviously, unprecedented times with COVID. Glad to know that your child, when school's in session, was utilizing SMART. Thank you for that. Investing in the community, the next generation, and having an environmentally superior option. So I appreciate that very much. I thought there was another hand raised there after Thomas, but now I don't see any hands. Is there anyone, as we wind down here in the last so many minutes, is there anyone else who, there we go, Steve Bertelbaugh.
Yeah, I lowered my hand because Thomas was pretty much saying what I was going to say. But I would add one other thing. When you're talking about dollars per passenger and that sort of thing, you're talking about a railroad that's in its infancy. Those numbers are going to change. And when you're talking about the people who benefit, it's not only the people on the train, it's property owners, it's businesses, it's the tourist industry. So we need to look at the whole project and not get too fixated on the particular dollar amounts. I do like the idea that we should be thinking about double tracking so that we can carry more passengers. So let's put that high on our list. Thank you for being here tonight.
No, thank you very much. So again, talking about dollars per passenger and/or fare box recovery, and perhaps doing a little deeper dive into what other transit entities have as fare box recovery, and then the benefits obviously beyond just the ridership itself, and again the double tracking, which I totally agree with. Anyone else have anything to add as we wind down? Thank you all for taking the time in this experiment. I think it's important, obviously, and I'll just speak before I add back to the chair. It's important for us to get out and really have a conversation and listen. I think part of it is listening. There's been a lot of talk over one another, but listening is a vitally important thing that we need to do more, probably more of, and that's for everyone in government and in every kind of entity. So with that, I'll turn it back to our chair to maybe have a final comment before we say thank you again.
Thank you, Director Rabbit, and thank you everybody for joining. I also noticed that another one of our SMART directors, Director Phillips, Mayor of San Rafael, was also able to join and listen in, so we appreciate that. I just really want to thank everybody for taking the time, coming to participate, sharing your feedback. This is the first of many listening sessions. We encourage you to join others. Please, if you did join this one and you did speak, your comments have been captured and will be shared. You don't necessarily have to join every single one, but you're welcome to. If you do join other ones and wish to speak, I think our only ask would be to maybe raise your hand near the end so we make sure we hear from everybody who hasn't spoken yet, just in case you do happen to join again. But we're great. I think this was a great start. I think at a peak, we had maybe 60 participants in this meeting, which is great. We've always gotten wonderful feedback at SMART. When we did a survey several months ago, we had about 3,000 people fill that out online. So this is a good start. Help us spread the word. Continue to provide feedback to us through these forums, through email, through attending SMART board meetings. And want to especially thank the city of Santa Rosa for virtually hosting us, the mayor, Tom Schwaldhelm, who was on earlier, all the SMART board of directors that are here, and Director Rogers and Director Rabbit for helping to host this meeting. With that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you and have a good evening.